Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's Hangout. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm going to give everybody a couple minutes just to get in here so everyone's in the room. If you could just in the chat box on the right, just leave me a message where you're from. I'd love to know where people are joining us from today. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we actually got some snow today, which was fun because we rarely get snow. Yeah, so if you just want to leave in the chat where you're from, and we'll get started here in just a few minutes. Jacksonville, North. Oh, Concord and Jacksonville. Awesome. Two from North Carolina. Rudy, Atlanta, Georgia. Very cool. Chicago. Very cool. Just going to give it another minute or two just to make sure everybody's got time to get in. Oh, icy in Myrtle Beach. Be careful with the ice. Yeah, we got ice last week in Charlotte, and it was pretty slick. Spartanburg, South Carolina. Very cool. A lot of people from the South here today. Again, just going to give another minute or so. I'm really excited you guys could join me here. This is the first time I've done one this late in the evening. So I guess you guys on the West Coast, it's not that late. But those of you on the East Coast, thank you for joining. And, this whole thing will take about an hour. I'm going to give you a little presentation talking about digital post-processing. And then we'll open up some questions and answers at the end. So it should be done in about an hour. In case you're watching the Parks and Rec finale tonight, you'll be able to go and see that. Pittsburgh, Tracy from New Jersey. Awesome. If you guys have never been in a webinar jam hosted webinar, this whole bar on the right, that's where it's got the chat, which you guys have figured out how to do. And then, so at the end, I'm going to do some question and answer. So you can just put your questions in the chat box over there to the right, and I'll be sure to answer them. All right, I think we've given enough time here. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to open it up to the presentation here. Let me get that pulled up. Okay. All right, guys, well, I want to welcome you to Introduction to Digital Post-Processing for Creatives. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about Photoshop and Lightroom and how you can use them to help with your photography workflow. So, hi, my name is Taylor Mathis. I want to thank you guys for joining me. I'm a food photographer based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I also run a food blog called Taylor Takes a Taste with my mom, who's a professional recipe developer. I've got an educational food series, which some of you may be familiar with, called Photographing Food. And then I've also written the Southern Tailgating Cookbook. So that's a little bit about me. And I've been using Photoshop for probably close to a decade now. And the program's been under some amazing changes over the last couple of years. So the agenda for today is we're going to talk about how you can stay organized with the massive amount of digital images you'll be creating. We're going to talk about some developing your images and some of the development tools that these software offers that I think are really great and you should definitely take advantage of. And then we're also going to talk about image manipulation and how you can use the software to create stuff that just does not exist in the real world. And then we're going to talk about exporting and merging text with images. And then finally, we're going to talk about where you can go next and how to improve. Okay, so I don't know if you guys know this, but I think it was about maybe a year and a half ago or so, Adobe came out with this new thing called the Creative Cloud. And they decided that all their software would now be in the cloud and that you wouldn't buy a disk and load it on your computer anymore. And with this, they created a plan called the Photography Plan. And if you can see on the bottom left, you can see the Photography Plan. And for $9.99 a month, it gives you the latest version of Lightroom and the latest version of Photoshop. This is huge because this software used to run, Photoshop individually used to be probably close to $1,000, and then Lightroom was probably at one time $200, maybe like $150. But you get both of them for only $10 a month, and you get the latest versions because they come out with new versions probably about every year and a half or so. So you always get the new ones. You don't have to pay an upgrade fee or anything like that. And the upgrade fee is usually probably like $200-300, something like that, to upgrade it. So you now have access to, in my opinion, the best imaging editing software out there for just $10 a month, which that's just unbelievable that is now, that low of a price. So the barrier to entry price-wise is gone. So this software, you can do a lot of things. One is organization. So that's what we're going to talk about first. So let me ask you a question. If a magazine wanted to publish a picture you took 2 years ago, could you find it? And let's say that a company wanted to see all of your tomato pictures because they know that you have some tomato pictures they saw on your blog, and they feel like you could have a lot of different options that they want to buy from you. And they want to see as many as you have because they want to buy a lot of images, and they don't want to go around a bunch of people. They just want to work with just you and see what, and if you have enough, they'll buy them all from you. Would you be able to quickly find all of those? Now, what if you did some work for a client last year and they lost the high-res files you sent and they wanted new files? Could you quickly just export new ones out and get them right to them in the next half hour? Well, with Lightroom, you can achieve all of these things. Lightroom is this amazing software that's developed into modules. And here's what it looks like if you've never seen it. Up at top, you can see the word library and it's highlighted. That's because this is the library module. And this is what allows you to stay organized and stay sane. You can create keywords for images so you can quickly find them. Or if you're submitting to stock sites, the keywords will already be embedded. You can control your metadata, which metadata is like this information that rides along with the image that tells who shot it, the copyright of it, what's in it, what it was shot with, like what camera, what lens, all those kind of things. And you can control what information you want in there. So if someone ever finds your image and wants to know who shot it, they can look in the metadata and see, oh, okay, Joe Smith shot this. I need to contact them to license it. Now, one of my favorite features is the ability to create folders, catalogs, and collections. This will give you sanity and allow you to organize, a massive amount of images and quickly have them at your fingertips to be able to pull up anyone that you need. And then the ratings and color labels allow you to quickly filter images so you can be very efficient after a shoot. So let's say that you're doing a shoot and you shot, like 4 or 5 subjects and you wanted to go through and edit them. What you could do is you could assign each of those subjects a color, say like green, red, yellow, or blue. And then within that color, you could say, I only want to look at the green ones. And the green ones are just subject number 1. So only subject number 1 would show up. And then from there, you can do star ratings and get the ones that you want to take further into either Photoshop or develop more in Lightroom. And then let's say, okay, I've got all my 5-star images. I don't really want to see the color selection anymore. I just want to see the 5-star best images. So then you can just sort by that. So it allows you to efficiently move between one set of images to another, and it can just help you speed up your workflow and just have some efficient practices going on so you can work very quickly and you're not wasting time searching for your images. Now, okay, the library, it's not the sexiest part of the software at all, but it's really awesome in how it can save you time and can just relieve a lot of pressure and strain. But the developing, that's really the cool stuff. That's where I take our images from looking okay to, oh my gosh, that's awesome. How'd you do that? Every picture that comes out of your camera, especially if you're shooting RAW, which if you guys don't know, RAW is the highest file size in your camera. It's basically the data that every single pixel registered when the light hit it. So if you have RAW on your camera, you really want to be shooting in it because you're capturing the full megapixels of the camera you have, and really have the most information to work with. And to view a RAW file, you have to have a RAW processor. In Lightroom, it can process RAW files, so you're going to be able to work with them. And what's cool about RAW is when you're making these developing changes, you're not actually editing on the picture. So guess what? You can't mess up the picture. What you're doing is you're just making changes to it, and the computer's talking, Lightroom's figuring out, okay, if they increase by that, I add that. It's doing a bunch of math and getting some calculations to make those adjustments show up, but it's never touching the actual file because the file is just a bunch of numbers. You can't destroy the pictures. So with JPEGs, on the other hand, you can. If you accidentally make an edit and save over it, you can't go back and change it. With RAW, you can quickly go back and forth between different changes and different edits. So here is what the develop module of Lightroom looks like. We'll see on the bottom that you've got, this film strip showing a bunch of different images. You can see where you've got your star filters and your different colors. And you can see on the right, you've got a histogram and a bunch of different sliders that do a lot of cool things. That's how you're going to edit your images, by moving these sliders back and forth, and they'll do different things. So here are just kind of 5 quick adjustments that you can do and make a pretty big difference in your food photography. So exposure's a great one. So you'll see on the left, we have -1/2 a stop, we have 0, and we have +1/2 a stop. So 0 is what the camera shot. Sometimes you may want to underexpose the image slightly. Perfect, just slide a little to the left. And sometimes, the image that you captured, you realize that you could have increased the exposure just a little bit. Not a problem, just slide it to the right. So on the right, we've got the same subject, but with a 1/2 stop increase in exposure. And you can do, you don't have to go in exact 1/2 stops. You can do it by 0.12, 0.14. You can choose as little as much as you want to, up to ±4 stops. So there's a huge range that you can increase exposure in your images. The next one, and this is a pretty powerful one, is the color temperature. And color temperature is measured on the Kelvin scale. So what that means is basically the lower the number, like 4000K, notice how it's a little bluer, and notice how 5000K is a little warmer. So the lower the number, the bluer it's going to be. The higher the number, the more warm looking it's going to be. Because when you're taking down the temperature, you see on the 4000K, you're bringing the color temperature down, so it's making it cooler because it was a warmer image. So, this comes into play like if you've got some different shades of whites in your image, you'll notice that some have a cooler look and some have a warmer look. You can kind of pick a balance point, and there's also a tool where you can pick one of those whites to make it neutral and select the white balance based on that. Okay, contrast is another one where it's got a slider where you can go up and down and add contrast or decrease contrast. So the image on the right has an increase in contrast. The image on the left has a decrease in contrast. So another one that I like is the sharpening tool. And every image that comes out of your camera is going to need some sharpening because it's just not as sharp. A raw file, it needs sharpening. So you can add that sharpening to your files. And when you do that, you need to be zoomed in at 100% to really see what's going on. So that's why this raspberry is so large looking. So here's it was sharpened at 50, and you can see how it got a little grainier. And then you'll notice how here, as it gets grainier, you can see a bunch of noise we have in the image. Well, if you have noise caused by shooting at a higher ISO, then you can use the fifth tool, which is the noise reduction slider, and you can reduce that. So you can kind of play between smoothing it out with the noise reduction and then sharpening to find something that's going to work best for your image. Another tool that you can use are the highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. So here on the left, you can see it's just the normal image. Everything's at 0. And then on the right, you can see we've made some changes, and it's made a drastic look in the image. We've taken the highlights down, we've taken the shadows down, we've increased the whites, and then we've decreased the blacks. So notice how the shadows are a lot darker, and the whole image has just kind of a more contrasty look to it. So just with these sliders, you can slide things up and down and make some pretty big changes to your image. So the cloning and healing tools are really powerful because you can fix things that you just could not fix on set. So the image on the right, you see the cheesecake, how it's got these air holes in it. There's absolutely nothing I could do after it was done baking because I would have to destroy the topping to get inside and remove those. But with the cloning and healing tools, I can fix that in post-production, and it's just something I could not do on set. So it's a really powerful tool where you can make changes and fix things that would be impossible to do on set and still get that perfect image that you're looking for. Curves. This is a tool that is both in Photoshop and in Lightroom and is incredibly powerful. So what the curve is you'll notice it looks kind of like the histogram on the Lightroom on the right. You can see there's kind of a graph underneath it. And as you move this line, what it's going to do is it's going to change the parts of the image that are directly below the line. So you'll notice on the right how it goes kind of up. That's where the highlights are. And on the left are where the shadows are. If you bring the curve up, then you're going to increase the value of the things below it. You bring the curve down, it'll decrease it. So here's kind of what I mean by that. So this is just the straight normal curve. And then here's it with what they call an S curve, because see how it makes an S? We've added some contrast. So what we've done is we've increased the highlights and we've decreased the shadows. I'm going to go back so you can see the first linear curve. All right, so here's the original image. Now pay attention to the jar, the highlights, and then the shadows on the hands. You can see how the highlights got brighter and then the shadows got darker. So with the curve, you can go and affect specific places in the image, whereas the exposure slider is going to increase the exposure in everything, or the contrast is going to increase the contrast in everything. But with the curve, you can pinpoint exactly where in the image you want those changes to happen. And then when using the curve in Photoshop, you can go even further by using something called masking to make those changes appear or disappear in certain parts of the image or in certain adjustments to the image. So now here's another curve. See, here's what we've done, have made kind of a flat curve where we have lowered the maximum value of the whites and the blacks and then pulled down the value in the middle. And that gives us this flat looking, matte kind of look. So let's compare this to the first one. So here's the original. There's the matte one. Notice how the blacks are a little flatter. The whole image just has that kind of flat, vintagey matte look. Okay. Part 3, manipulating your images. So you can develop your images in both Lightroom and Photoshop, but then when you go specifically into Photoshop, you can do things that just you cannot do in the camera. So cloning and healing was a little bit of that, but you can go even further in Photoshop by duplicating parts of the images, flipping things around, and just doing some really heavy retouching and fixing a lot of problems that you probably couldn't have fixed on set. Now, it's cool to have these tools, but whenever you can fix something on set, it's always going to be easier than fixing in the computer, because something that could have taken 2 seconds to fix on set may take you 20 or 30 minutes to fix in the computer. So just keep that in mind, that when you can fix something on set, you want to go that route and fix that. So with Photoshop, you can create composites. And this is one of my favorite tools of Photoshop. And what a composite is you take parts of 2 or 3 images and you put them together with certain parts showing. So on the left, we've got a shot from a restaurant, and this was shot under ambient light. Notice how the food looks okay, not great. It's got that restaurant lighting that's kind of flat. Then on the right, I've lit this with a flash. So the food looks great, but we don't really have that ambient light anymore in the restaurant. We just got kind of black. Those wine bottles, there's kind of dark in the background. It's just kind of boring. So the image on the far right is where I took those first 2 images and I merged them together and created a composite. And I did this through masking. So masking is where you can take parts of one image and have it show up on top of other parts of another image. And the way this works is every image coming into Photoshop is on a different layer. So the layers, they stack on top of each other. So whatever is on top is going to be covering what's below it. But with a mask, you can remove parts of that so you can see through to the layer below. So let me show you a closer look. So here we go. Here's our image in Photoshop. You can see our bottom layer is just the ambient. And then here we have the flash. And notice how, I've taken away kind of the background, and you're just seeing transparency. Because what this is going to do is this flash layer is going to be on top of the ambient layer, and you're going to see through that layer to the bottom. So here's the first layer. And now on top of that, we're going to place the flash layer. And then when you combine them together, you end up with this image. So you can see how parts of the chair are shown, and then most of the wine bottle in the back is kind of taken away. And what you do is you're blending these 2 images together with masks and creating this composite. Now, another cool thing you can do is from Lightroom, you can export your images directly into Photoshop, and you can create a panoramic by stitching the images together. So here's an example of a mountain scene that was made with 12 images. I took these 12 images, ran them through Photoshop, and it magically stitched this bottom picture together. So this is how you make panoramics, which I could not have made a file like this out of my camera just because the dimensions wouldn't work. I could have taken a wider shot and then cropped in, but I'd be losing file size and throwing away information. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a panoramic of all those images together by shooting individual frames that lap over each other, and then Photoshop will use its photo merge tool to magically stitch them together and give you, this resulting panoramic image. Okay, so while Lightroom and Photoshop, you can do amazing jobs like organizing your images and then editing them to make them look exactly the way you want, but this does you no good if you cannot export the images to the final dimensions that you need. So for example, let's say you're shooting a cookbook and all the images in the book need to be cropped to 8 inches by 10 inches. It's great if you have this amazing image, but if it doesn't fit that crop, then you're going to be throwing away part of the image and it may not work as well as you thought it would. But with Lightroom, you can crop your images to that crop in Lightroom and see if it's going to work and see how you need to adjust the image to make sure that 8 by 10 crop is going to look exactly like it needs to in the book. Another one is, the dimensions. Let's say you're submitting stuff to a website and they have strict rules that, their stuff needs to be a certain pixel by a certain pixel. Otherwise, it won't really fit in the site and it'll just look out of will just look really weird. You've been to a website before, I bet, where the images weren't sized correctly and they just kind of stick out in places they shouldn't. Well, if you don't know the dimensions of it and you don't export your image in those correct dimensions, then you can't have that, correctly. But in Lightroom, you can easily do that. Another thing to think about is your image going to be used for print, or is it going to be used for web? If it's going to be used for print, it requires a different resolution than you need for web. So for web, you need something that's generally 72 pixels per inch. And then for print, you're generally going to need something that is 300 pixels per inch. And with that, what is the final file type? It could be a JPEG, because that's probably the most common one to use. But if you're printing something for a book, they may require TIFFs, which TIFFs are massive files that they're going to need all that information to print the book from. But if you give them JPEGs and they need TIFFs, the pictures may not turn out the way you wanted them to because they weren't a big enough file. So it's always good to know the final use that you're using, because it's going to give you the ability to deliver the files that are going to be the most useful to your client or to you for whatever purpose that you intend them to be used for. So here's a look at the export panel in Lightroom. And you can see there's a lot of different options. You can export things to different folders. You can put them in subfolders. You can give them custom naming sequences. You can export them as a JPEG, a TIFF. You can export the original RAW file if you're doing backing up, or you wanted to take them over to a different computer. You can resize them to fit a specific dimensions, and you can also change the resolution to be exactly what it needs to be, whether it's for web or whether it's for print. Now, a really cool feature of Lightroom that I like is the print feature, where you can create these templates that in just a few clicks, you can create something that's sized perfectly for, say, Instagram, where it needs to be 640 by 640, or for the food sharing sites like Food Gawker, that I think it needs to be 350 by 350. You can create this template and you literally just drag the pictures off the film strip and just save them, and they're saved exactly the dimensions you need them to be. So you can create a bunch of different things with these templates. So here are just some that I quickly threw together using the templates, like just by throwing images together. I can make diptychs, I can make triptychs, I can make squares, I can make these rectangles with two squares on top. So for your social media, you can easily export and make the final use files that you need to, so they'll always fit in the specific social media form. Because we all know that, with Instagram, they like squares. With, Facebook, they like it to be a certain dimension and certain ratio. Same with Twitter. And you can always make sure that your images are sized perfectly so that the parts of the image you want will be showing up there. And you won't have to worry about, the image being shifted and not really looking or conveying the message that you wanted it to have. So print templates are an awesome feature of Lightroom, and there's something you can quickly create them, because it saves it as a JPEG, so you can then go put them on a blog or share them on any site. So when you take your images from Lightroom, you can then bring them into Photoshop, where you can add text. And adding text to the image allows you to create some amazing pieces of media and content that will really get your message across. And you can create them at whatever ratio or dimension or file size that you need to. You can also do cool effects, like you see the fire below, where you can take an image and have it overlay through a font. So there's a whole wide range of options you have, which really the only limits your creativity of how you want to incorporate your images with text or illustrations to make these forms of media that are incredibly powerful and will get whatever message you have across. Okay, so Lightroom and Photoshop, they're amazing programs, but they're not exactly the most intuitive things to use in the world. There can be a huge learning curve, and honestly, they can be incredibly intimidating, because you don't really need everything that the software provides. You just need to know how to do what you want to do with it. So I want to help you do that. So I've created a course that's going to help you do this. I've created digital post-processing for creatives, and it's a course designed around practical examples that will teach you how to use Lightroom and Photoshop to get the results that you want, to stay organized, to edit your images, and then to create the media and prepare your images for the final uses that you're going to get the most use out of. So this course is a little different in that it's a video-based course where it's screen videos where you're watching me work in the software. I'm showing you what I'm doing. I'm walking you through why I'm doing it. But instead of you having to download gigabytes after gigabytes of massive files, it's hosted through a site called Business of Creatives, where you have a login and you can log in and access the content at any time. You can access it from a computer. You can access it from your smartphone, and you can sit there and watch the videos whenever you want. And you don't have these enormous files weighing down your hard drive. And honestly, to download those files would take a really long time. And if your internet connection is not that fast, it may fail while downloading, and that's incredibly frustrating. So in designing this course, I wanted to make it hosted where you have a membership that you can sign up and log into. And also, by doing it this way, there's automatic updates included in the course. You don't have to re-download all the files. As new content and changes in the software happen, the videos will just be updated right there on the course, and you have access to them right there. And with these videos, I've made them so you can follow along really easily. They're anywhere from 2.5 to about 13 or 14 minutes. So it's not like you have to sit there for 45 minutes and watch through an entire video. I've broken them down so they're easy to comprehend, and you can watch and work at your own pace. And in some examples, I've also included files for you to work on and for you to try so that you can do exactly what I'm doing and figure it out. I know some people learn best by actually sitting there and doing it. So I provided the file for you to work on directly, and you can just copy what I'm doing, or you can try and do it your own way. And with this course, there's no recurring fees. It's a one-time payment, and you're in the course forever. So that's it. Just one time, you're in. As new content gets added, new updates, there's no other fees, you're in. There's also a Facebook group with the course that's going to have exclusive content I put up, and that'll include interviews with industry professionals, special offers from them, and just conversations that may arise from people asking questions that we can really learn from each other. So this Facebook group is only open to people in digital post-processing for creatives. Now, the coolest thing I think about this too is, like, with Photoshop and Lightroom, you just can't sit there and learn it all in one sitting. You just can't. There's a little over 5 hours of content in this course. Yes, you can sit there and watch it all, but it's not going to all sink in. You learn it by doing and watching examples and just continuing to work on it. So it's an evolving process. So the next product from Photographing Food is included in with the course, and this is Photographing Food Weekly. So every week you'll have a new video that shows you a food shoot, then takes you behind the scenes of how I shot it, and then it goes into the post-processing of it. And how do you actually use these post-processing tools to apply to practical examples that you can find yourself using as well. And every food's a little different, so the subjects will be different. There'll be different ways to learn from them. They'll be on different backgrounds, different camera angles. So you can just learn by watching these videos, and they'll be anywhere from 7 to 15 minutes, probably around somewhere there. It just depends on how many shots we do, how many things there are to talk about. But every week there'll be a new episode added in, and you're in this forever. You don't need to ever pay for it again. When you sign up for the course, you're in it. One day this will split off as its own standalone product, but for you, you're always in it. All of this is available for $79. So I'm going to switch over here to okay, so I'm back. So all of this is available for $79, and I've got a page where you can check it out. I've included sample videos for you to look at. And I've also included sample videos of Photographing Food Weekly for you to look at. So you can see, is this course right for you? And there's a whole list of all the videos that's covered. And, now I really just want to open it up to any questions that you guys have about post-processing, about the course, about Photographing Food Weekly, kind of anything that you have. So if you just want to put question in the chat box and we'll just get going. We've got about 25 minutes to answer whatever you guys have questions about. Liz, answer your question. Will presentations be available via email to attendees later? Yes, you'll be receiving a recording of this possibly tomorrow or later this week. It will be emailed to you so you can watch it later on. Okay, let's see. Okay, so Brian has a question. How did you make the fire panel? Are you talking about the text that had the fire behind it? That was done during using a clipping mask. And there is a video in the course that shows you exactly how I did it. But basically, you have a layer above, which whatever you want to fill that text in as. And then if you put the text on a layer below, and then you go to, I think it's like File, Apply, Clipping Mask, or if you just search for Clipping Mask, I'll show you where it is, and you just add a clipping mask to that top layer, and it puts it directly on the bottom layer. Okay, Kelly asks, if you purchase the monthly Lightroom, if you stop the subscription, are your photos still organized in Lightroom? So when you bring your photos into Lightroom, you have them there. And yeah, I think if you do stop the monthly subscription, I don't know if they'll still be in there because I don't know if you'll have access to the software after a certain point of time. But if you are taking a lot of pictures, and Lightroom really is the best way, in my opinion, to organize them. So I think it is definitely something to keep going with. You can purchase standalone versions of Lightroom for, I'm not exactly sure how much. I can look up if you send me an email, I can try and find that for you. So you could purchase that if you don't want to do the cloud all the time. But having Lightroom and Photoshop together is a huge benefit. Okay, so Tracy asks, what are my thoughts on using iPhone for food photography? Is there a specific camera you recommend? No, iPhone's not bad at all. Basically, with food photography, your lighting is a huge factor into how great your image is going to be. So if you have awesome lighting, you can take a great picture with an iPhone. And then Kelly's asking, to follow up Tracy's questions, what about camera recommendations, lenses? This is something I get asked a lot. So I'm actually working on a complete gear guide that I can email out to everyone later in the week. But a DSLR is great. Lens wise, the 50mm lens is awesome. The 100mm macro is probably what I shoot most of my food stuff with. So I'm very partial to that lens. But I will send all you guys out an email later in the week to a gear guide so you can see just everything I use and all that I recommend, because I could do an entire webinar just on gear because there's a lot of different things you can use. And it should come down to kind of what your budget is and what you want to spend on this, because you shouldn't spend more than you're capable of spending, because it's not a good idea. But you can get great options at every price point. Oh, so Brian, yes, you're asking about the fire thing. Yeah, so that was done with using a clipping mask in Photoshop. Okay, Rudy, awesome. Yeah, well, I'm working on that this week, so by the end of the week, I should have that out for you guys. And because you're all on the email for this, you'll definitely get that. And so I'll put a list out for that so that you can, find the gear and learn about what's going to help you best. Yeah, I'll definitely send that out. And yeah, it is confusing because, especially when you're on a budget, because what's more important, the camera or the lens? Because photography is not cheap. You can quickly start spending a lot of money on it. But really, with your intro DSLR, you can still take some great pictures. You know, it is nice having the macro lens and stuff because it does allow you to do things that you can't do without it. But it is expensive. So definitely. But with lighting, though, you can get some great lighting results with that aren't terribly expensive. So I'll include varying price points in there. Just what Kelly, what could you tell me, like a range of what your budget of what you would want to spend on a camera, that so I kind of have an idea of what would a max budget be, or what would you like to stay in to for like a camera and a lens, something like that. Yes, I am a Mac user. So with the biggest difference with PC to Mac with Photoshop and Lightroom is the shortcuts and which keys do it, because the Alt key is Windows, the Option key is Mac, and the Command key is Mac. The Control is Windows. So that's the biggest shift, is in when you're using shortcuts, which key you're hitting. Um, but other than that, I mean, the software, it still looks the same, runs the same. It's just the shortcuts that are the difference, because they have some different keys to them. have any more questions, feel free to add them here in the chat. And then also, if you have any questions about the course or anything, let me know. I've stuck a note to the top of the chat where you can check it out. And also, if you click on the pop-ins tab at the top, you can see a link to the course as well. Kelly's asking, is Lightroom okay for storing video? Yeah, it can handle and store video. I don't, simply because when I have video on my hard drive, I don't keep it on there for too long because it's really big. It takes up a lot of room. So with video, I kind of just keep it in folders and look through it. But so I don't really use it much, the video much for Lightroom, but you can store Lightroom, the video in Lightroom catalogs and organize it that way. I just personally don't, because I've got a different system for video. I'm giving it a few more minutes. If you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat. I really appreciate you taking time this evening and joining me, and I hope you found what we talked about informational and helpful. If you have any other questions, you can always send me an email, taylor@photographingfood.com, and I'd love to answer it. Tracy asks, I have an older Canon PowerShot. What are your thoughts about using this and getting a lens for it? I don't know if that's an SLR. You need a digital SLR to be able to change lenses, because the name SLR is single lens reflex. So like you can take the lenses off and put new ones on. So I think the PowerShot, it should be able to work. But I don't know if you'll be able to put different lenses on it. I think you would need, something like the Rebel or something like that as the entry level one to work with. Not a problem, Rudy. Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate you taking the time out to join us for the webinar. Not a problem, Lindsay. I really appreciate you coming by. I hope you found it valuable. Okay, Kelly, I look forward to the course. Oh, awesome. I'm excited to dive back in this world. Well, welcome back. Yeah, and it's definitely, something, you can forget it if you're not using the settings and software every day, but it is like a bike. You do remember it, so you just got to get back in there and keep working. But thank you for your questions and for coming by. I really appreciate it. All right, guys, we've got just a few more minutes here. If you've got any other question, put it up. Otherwise, I really appreciate you coming by tonight. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening. I'll stick around for another 2 or 3 minutes and see if there are any more questions. But thank you again for coming by. And if you have any other questions, you can always send an email, taylor@photographingfood.com. Awesome, Tracy. Glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, and you can sign up for the course in the link below. Again, and if you have any other questions, you can always send me an email. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for your great questions. Thanks for coming by. Oh, of the cookbook, it's the Southern Tailgating Cookbook. All right, just another minute here, and then I think I'm going to call this webinar over. I really appreciate everybody for coming by tonight, and I hope you found the information valuable. And I look forward to having you on a webinar in the future. Not a problem, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming by. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming by and for all your questions. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me tonight, and I look forward to having you guys on the next webinar. So until then, if you ever have a question, always send me an email, taylor@photographingfood.com, look forward to talking with you soon. And I'll send out a replay in case anybody had to leave or missed parts of this, or if they missed the beginning, you'll be able to see that then. So have a great rest of your night, everybody.